Hey, Legacy Warriors, welcome to episode 11 of the Legacy Warrior podcast, where we help you get in life's arena, become the best version of self, and elevate your legacy. I am here with my beautiful wife and my partner in crime, Stephanie McKinley.
Hey, everybody.
Man, look, this one's going to be deep today, guys. This one's going to be deep because today's topic has paralyzed every single one of us at moments in our life. We've overcame this emotion and felt that exhilaration of just making it to the other side. And we will fight this battle as human beings until our last breath on this earth. So today we're talking about fear. Y'all, I can't wait to get into this conversation about how we just learn how to embrace the fear of the unknown, run straight forward into the rest of our life, and stop being paralyzed by the fear of the unknown, like many of us have done so many different times in our life. At least I can speak for myself on that.
Yeah, you guys, I have to be honest on this one. Walt is like the guru of fear.
Oh, snap. Hold on. Yay.
For real. I've even told him like he should do talks on embracing fear, because he is really the epitome of someone who faces his fears head on. And that's why he's so strong in this subject, because he has done it. He has really, really faced his fear head on, and in many situations. And what I've learned through even watching him is that every time you do that, you become much stronger, and it becomes less scary every time. So you just become, he's become where, he almost doesn't even hesitate to do a lot of things that are so scary for most people, because he just knows that when you face it, what's on the other side. And I mean, you can't beat it. And and he's made me realize, and he tells a lot of people to look at your life resume when it comes to this. And I had to really do this for myself. Mm-hmm. When you look at your life resume, you look back on all the times where you faced something fearful and you did it and you faced it head on, what was the result of that? Because every time I've looked at it back on my life, and I look at it and I go, wow, something better always came out of it. Mm. Or if it didn't, I learned something.
Well, and for me, your lesson learned typically gets you something better than what would have been better if you would have got it in the first moment of overcoming the fear. It's right. Like the lessons learned, the value of those catapult where you thought you were headed 10 times past that destination and into the destination of where you're going next, by just really just pushing through that fear that can keep us all in paralysis.
Yeah, I feel like I know for me, every time I did it, like I said, either I realized I turned out way better. Something turned out way better. I got a better result than what I initially had. Or by learning in the process, I realized like this was part of my journey. I needed to learn this first in order to move to the next step. I wasn't ready for that next step. I had to go through this to get to that. And that's what you'll find when you look back at your life. And this is why with age comes wisdom. Is because the older you get, you have more to look back on. You have a lot more experiences that you went through. You've learned a lot more because you've been through more. And it's every one of those experiences, you gain some knowledge, you gain something, you learn something. So it really does increase your wisdom over time. That's what's so powerful about it.
Yeah, I think, and that's why I tell people, look at your life resume, because it's so powerful. Because in the moment when you're overcoming fear, you're trying to work through the fear to do whatever that is. Start a relationship, get in a job, leave corporate America, have children. Mm-hmm. All of these different things that we do in our lives that are going to bring us happiness and success. You got to look at your life resume outside of just that moment. Because if you just look in the moment, that fear will cause you to hesitate. Sometimes that fear will cause you to not even take the chance that your heart and soul is yearning for, which just leads to regret. And we're going to talk about first what fear is. What are some of the most common fears that we see people struggle with? Which ones have we struggled with personally? As always, we're going to give you the 4 keys this time to breaking fear. What can you start doing today to really move through it? And we're going to share some personal stories with you about what we've done, what we've seen other people do. And I think Steph's right. I've been able to overcome a lot of fear in my life. And I talked about the trauma that I went through. You guys at this point, if you've been listening for 11 episodes, you understand the stories. It's a little bit that comes out each time. I talked pretty heavily about it in episode 2. There was a point in my life at 15 and a half when my dad had been hitting me. We had worked with Child Protective Services to get me out of the home. He had to hit me again before I left. And being in the middle of the street with him having punched me in my face in front of my friends and in front of the entire city block, it was the most scary moment of my life. It still is the most scary moment of my life, to be honest with you.
Well, you spent those first 16 years in fear.
In fear, paralyzed.
Paralyzed in the fear.
Not telling the truth when I had the opportunity, not speaking my truth when I had the opportunity, not feeling like my life was ever going to be great. I mean, I just really survived the moments versus thriving or having hopes and dreams.
And that whole time you were miserable, living in the fear.
Totally miserable living in the fear. And there's 4 types of fear response, and there are trauma responses too. You got fight, flight, fear, or fawn. And for me, I've experienced all of those. But in this moment, I chose to fight for myself. And I often say this. I didn't run from my dad that day. I actually ran into the rest of my life. It still to this moment is the single most pivotal moment that I've ever had for multiple reasons. In this case, and what we're talking about today is my ability to embrace the fear of the unknown. Because let's be real, I didn't know what the hell was going to happen once I ran, and just do it scared and do it anyway. But what it showed me was, because ultimately I went to live with my aunt, which was the best case scenario. What it showed me was by embracing the fear, I actually elevated my life. I was able to stop surviving and start thriving. And so I can reflect on that moment and have perspective looking at my life resume when I'm scared to do something now and do it anyway.
Well, yeah, I want to go back for a second, because when you made that decision to run from your dad, what was the fears that you were thinking at the time? What was the worst case scenario that would have happened in that situation?
The worst case scenario would have been I would have been put back with my dad, and he told me he would kill
where
me.
You were at.
Right. And people go back to the comfortable pain, Steph, oftentimes because it's familiar. It's easier to stay in the pain. It's easier to sit in the fear. It's easier.
Comfortable sometimes.
It will feel easier in the moment, but it will lead you to a life of regret later if you don't allow yourself to embrace the fear. So, I mean, what is fear? So we looked up the definition. It's pretty long, but in short form, fear is an emotion. This is big, guys. An emotion. It's not reality. It might feel like your reality in the minute based upon the emotion, but it's not based in fact. It's based upon the emotion and perception of what you think is going to happen. So fear is an emotion characterized by an intense and unpleasant feeling of perceived danger or threat.
Perceived danger, keyword there.
Emotion, feeling, perceived. But fear is supposed to protect you. That's our body's mechanism to keep us out of trouble. If you run into the middle of the freeway, you're going to be scared as hell, and your adrenaline's going to pick up. Your ability to move back and forth quicker is going to pick up, because in that moment, your body is fearful you might get hit. And because it's fearful, you can move quicker.
Right. I want you to be aware of your fear. Listen to your fear. It's there for a reason. It is to protect you. But when you're facing fear, we were talking a little bit before the episode about how the difference between perceived fear and real fear, because there's a real fear when, you could potentially, like I was telling him, like if I was walking to the parking lot or walking into a parking garage and I felt someone was following me and they could kidnap me, that's a real fear. And I need to listen to that fear, because if I feel that and feel that intuition, I have to listen to that to protect myself. But then there's a different fear of like, if I'm going to get up or I'm going for a job promotion and I'm fearful just that I'm not going to get the job, or, but there's not any real danger there. You know what I'm saying? So there's a difference between there actually being danger you're protecting yourself from and an emotional feeling that you're having. So you have to really ask yourself some questions in that moment. Like, is this real or is this perceived, for one? And then you have to start asking yourself the question, what if?
The comparison you're making is so genius to me, because the fears that we have now are based upon how we live today.
Mm-hmm.
But neuroscience has shown that the fear will shut down the prefrontal cortex of your brain. That controls your rational thinking ability, right? Which is why you feel irrational when you're in fear. Think about historically, hunter-gatherers, that's what we are. And so the man goes out to hunt a lion for food. Mm-hmm. So you're going to be scared as hell,
yeah.
Right?
Well, that's a real fear. You should be afraid of the lion.
Right.
The lion can eat you. Right. So you can die, yes.
And they're fast, so don't run. So, they go out their spears and their bows and arrow to go kill a lion so that they can feed their family and their tribe. They're going to get all the emotions we feel today around fear, right? They're going to get sweaty palms.
But then they also have to face it, because if they don't kill that lion to eat, they're going to die from hunger.
Right. So the fear of starving is greater than the fear of the lion at the point, but they're going to get an elevated heart rate. Their adrenaline's going to spike. Their palms are going to get sweaty. Their foreheads are going to get sweaty. Their prefrontal cortex is going to shut down in the moment. That controls the rational thinking, because rationally, I'm not trying to go fight no lion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Rationally, I'd be thinking that's a losing battle no matter what.
Right. Like, we better go find an antelope or something like that instead.
Oh, yeah.
Or
let's hunt a deer.
Yeah, something that can't hurt me. But the reality is, fear is a significant emotion. Fear can be an incredible motivator, but fear can also paralyze us. And it just hurts my heart to see so many people sit in fear every day and live in quiet desperation and commit suicide because they're fearful of judgment, or they're fearful of, if they speak their truth, who will believe them, or what will people think? And so they don't do those things. They don't go after the job promotions. They don't go after the relationships. They don't have children if that's what they want to do. They don't look for the career success, all based upon fear that most times is an irrational emotion that keeps them paralyzed and living a life of regrets. And so we're going to really dig into this today.
Right. So I just love those examples you just said. Like, for some people, the fear of a relationship with someone, I don't know what the fear might be, but maybe the fear of rejection. But then also, like, if you don't go for it, you could be missing out on the love of your life. Mm-hmm. What would that do to your life? And if you don't go for that job promotion because you're fearful you're not qualified enough, and you just don't go for it, but what if that ended up being the job of a lifetime? What if that was the best job you could have ever gotten, and it made you so happy? Like, so those are the what if questions when we're like, this is like Walt's jam. Like, if you ask yourself, what if, and you're like, you're down in that, like, what if, because I'm not good enough and this and that. And but what if my dream comes true? What if that is like the best thing that ever happened to me? Those are the kind of questions you got to ask yourself when you're facing fear, because like he just said, you could be living in quiet desperation, or you could be having the best time of your life. Like, it really comes down to that one choice, that one question you're asking yourself, and the way you're answering it. You could be missing out on the best things in your life. Well,
and I love this. So I will be doing a TED Talk on this, I hope this year, at some point, maybe later in the year, maybe the very beginning of next year, just around the power of, around the two words of what if. We ask ourselves, what if, with every single decision that we make? We ask ourselves, what if when we're scared? We ask ourselves, what if when we're sad? We ask ourselves, what if when we're excited? We ask ourselves, what if when we've got this vision of where we want to go in our lives? We literally ask ourselves two words. And the way we ask ourselves those two words really do dictate the direction of our life, and ultimately whether or not we really live at our full capability. And the first thing that I see people really be paralyzed by There's so many internal pressures that we put on ourselves. There's so many external pressures that get put on us from society, or sometimes we perceive or put on us, even though it might not even be reality. The fear of failure is strong with people, and the fear of failure really do keep people paralyzed.
Oh yeah. Trust me, I can tell you guys this because I talked about it a little bit on one of our previous podcasts. Hasn't aired yet, but me doing this podcast, I didn't feel like I was questioning my qualifications to do this podcast. I'll put it that way. Because I've been a stay-at-home mom for most of my life now. 18 years of my life, I've been a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't work a traditional job. And so I'm telling Walt this, and he starts saying to me, but
These are some fun conversations.
He's like, we're not doing a podcast on business analytics. Like, I'm not going to ask you how to run a business. I'm not going to ask you.
You're not teaching people how to create an Excel sheet, use formulas. Like, that's not your jam.
He's like, this is going to be about relationships. Like, we've been married for, or we've been together for like 26 years. So we've raised children, one that's almost 19 and one that's 17. You got to look at your life resume and say, you are qualified if you look at it. He's like, we're going to be talking about life things, and you have a lot of experience in that. And ultimately, he was right.
Well, and a lot of passion around serving people and helping people understand your experiences to help them get around pitfalls maybe that you experienced, or to help them accelerate their life based upon what you did that accelerated yours. And so I think that's the big thing is.
Right. And I've been a military spouse. And so we've moved all over the place. We've been in all different kinds of cultures. And I've seen a lot of things. So.
Well, but you had so much internal pressure on yourself, which led to self-doubt, which led to lack of confidence. But you had a perception. This is what's really cool about this story specifically, Steph. You had a perception of what society was going to say about you doing this. That obviously you shown yourself by embracing the fear and doing it anyway was not real, because the feedback you've gotten has been tremendous.
Right.
When you thought it would have been opposite.
Absolutely. You're right. I almost didn't do it because of how I felt about how everyone would perceive me, how everyone, if they would think that I didn't have anything valuable to say, that they wouldn't listen, all these things. And the result has been the total opposite, polar opposite of that. I've got nothing but good feedback. Everyone's been telling me things I never thought they would use to describe me, words I never thought they would describe me as: powerful, one being one. I've been brought to tears just like thinking about what I would have missed out on had I not done this, because I was fearful of everyone's opinions.
Yeah. Back in episode 9, you guys saw her talking about doing this. She started getting teary-eyed. She started talking happy tears because she really embraced the fear. And it's interesting because if you never did this, you could go on with your life and you could find a lot of happiness. But when you look at people, and they've talked to people that are on their deathbed, they don't regret not having more money. They don't regret not buying more things. They regret their fear and ego keeping them from reconnecting with family that they lost touch with. They regret the chances that they didn't take. They regret that love that they had that they never said anything to.
Right. They either regret time they didn't spend with their loved ones, or they regret the chances they didn't take.
Right. Like, I think of people, and you see these love stories where people are in love and one person doesn't have the courage to say something to the other one. And they live a life of regret that they feel like they missed out on the love of their life. I see people that they don't take the chance to do something that's so aligned with their life purpose, that their heart and soul are just yearning for. But because the fear of failure is so heavy for them, they stay in that freeze mode or that fawn mode. They don't actually do it at all. And then they just regret, like, man, damn it, I should have taken that chance on what the thing that I was going to do, because even if I didn't get the result that I wanted, at least I would know. But what if I got the result that I always dreamt I could have from that? Holy mackerel. Like, how different would my life have been? And there's nothing worse to me. I don't even really use the word failure. I did my whole life, but I've just in the last year or so reframed it. It's really just a learning opportunity. There's no failure. To me, the only failure is not having the courage to go for the things that you want and then living a life of regret later and living a life of quiet desperation later because you didn't even try. That's failing. So every single one of us right now listening to this, you're out there, I'm touching your heart. You feel like I'm talking directly to you. It's not too late. If you're here and you're alive and you're breathing, I don't care if you're 75, 95, 105, or 46 like I am. There's still time. So do the things that bring you passion. Do the things that feel like it's your purpose. Serve those people that you wanted to serve your whole entire life. Be the change you always wanted to be, because today you got the courage to embrace the fear and do it anyway.
Yes, exactly. So we've been talking about some of the fears that we face. So we talked about the fear of failure, that's internal and external, social pressure and judgment, negative past experiences, and fear of the unknown, because we like certainty.
So, okay, let's the fear of the unknown is big, Steph. Okay, because I know you, when we talked about doing the pod, you had a story you wanted to tell about the fear of the unknown and the way you embraced it when you were young and we first met. That changed your life. Hopefully, it's for the better when you tell the story. Maybe someday she don't feel like it's for the better, but today, okay. So I think all of those things, fear of failure, social pressure and judgment, negative past experiences, how we feel about ourselves, the internal, external pressures, they're all baked in the fear of the unknown because we don't know. So if I told you, if you go buy the lottery for the next 5 days, spend $100 a day, and on the 5th day, you're going to win $100 million.
You would absolutely.
What you're going to do, you're going to go buy lottery tickets.
Exactly.
If I tell you you could heal from your trauma, and by healing from your trauma, you're going to open up a happiness, a peace, and a freedom that you never thought that you would have. And you knew 100%, like it was guaranteed, crystal ball style, guaranteed, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you would do whatever you have to chase down that mission of healing your trauma to open up peace and happiness. The problem is the fear of the unknown really keeps people, and the uncertainty really keeps people paralyzed because they just don't have the belief that the outcome is going to be close to what it is, maybe not all the way, but even close to what it is. So they allow themselves to live in quiet desperation. You had a choice to make when you were 20.
Mm-hmm. Well, actually 19, 18 or 19.
Okay, so go ahead and tell the story. I think our timelines might be a little off here.
Well, okay, so when I met Walt, this was back in ages 1997. I met Walt.
I think I was still listening to like Biggie and Tupac and Ice Cube and all that stuff. She was listening to Pearl Jam. We was the odd couple.
So at that time, I was in my 2nd year of college, I believe. Now, I have to give you a little bit of background because when I graduated high school, I knew I wanted to go to college. I really wanted to move from where I live, where I grew up. I grew up in a really small rural town in Connecticut. And I just didn't see my life going anywhere there. I didn't really want to live there. Well, I tried to go to school in North Carolina because my grandmother owned a condo down there and she lived near the college because my grandfather used to work there. And I thought, oh, well, I could just go live with her for my first year, get in-state tuition, or get in-state residency so I could get in-state tuition, be affordable, and go to school there. So, I mean, I did everything I had to do to go. I went to the orientation. I got my parents to drive me all the way down there, went to the orientation, everything. Well, we get close to when school's supposed to start, and my grandmother backs out and says she's not comfortable with it. And I guess at that point, she was starting to feel like she wasn't going to be able to live on her own anymore. And she was going to she did end up moving to Virginia. So that fell through for me. So then I didn't really have any opportunity at that point to get in anywhere else because it was too late. And so I went to the community college that was near my home. So I stayed at home and I commuted to community college. Well, I met Walt while I was in the second year of that. Well, we hit it off and
Bada bang,
fell in love and, so
Rico Suave.
here we are a year. So after a year, we're together a year. Now we're serious and we're in love. And he's in the Navy at the time. And this is his first Navy school. Like he had just got out of boot camp, went to this school, and he was stationed at the submarine base in Connecticut. That's how I met him. And he came to the end of that school, and at the end of the school, they give you orders of somewhere they're going to place you, which isn't where you, isn't necessarily where you went to the school. It's generally some other state or country. So he goes through the top 3 in the class get to choose their orders or kind of.
Well, no. So by your rank of class, you get to choose your orders. And that's where you wanted to go. And I got to choose second because I was second in the class. There were 3 orders to Groton, Connecticut, which is where we were at. I picked one of them because, hey, I had this super hot chick that was in love with me and I was in love with her and I wanted to see where it went.
So he was trying to stay in Connecticut.
I go in one day, the week after I picked the orders, and the second and third place person, because the top 3 had all picked Connecticut, both of us got told 2 of our orders got pulled and we had to choose between Hawaii and Virginia because of the needs of the Navy. So I didn't have an option to stay in Connecticut anymore, which then leads us to Stephanie making this decision.
So, and before I even get to that, so at this point though, I can only do 2 years at a community college. At that point, you get your associates. You can get your associates, or you transfer to university for a 4-year to get your bachelor. So then at that point, I had made plans to transfer to the University of Rhode Island, which was also near my home because I actually lived on the border of Rhode Island and Connecticut, and I was actually only 3 miles from the border of Rhode Island. So University of Rhode Island was like 30 minutes from my home. And I had applied there, done everything to get into that school. My dad did all the financial aid paperwork with me. I was all set to go to University of Rhode Island. That was my plan. I was transferring there. My best friend went there. We were going to room together.
Perfect scenario for Stephanie.
Yeah. So I had this whole plan, right?
Except for me.
I didn't plan. Yeah. Didn't plan for Walt in that scenario.
You're welcome.
So he ends up telling me, and this is like, I met him in February. So you figure a semester, it ends in May, right? So somewhere around that time, maybe April, he tells me he gets these orders. And so I told him we'll try to stay in Connecticut. Well, when that fell through and he tells me he has to choose Hawaii or Virginia, I'm like, oh man, like what? Because I already had my plan to go to school where I was at, and that would have worked out for us.
Well, so here's how it went down. So I go over to Stephanie's house, mad as hell that I got my orders pulled, and now I got to pick between Hawaii and Virginia. They gave me Hawaii initially. My buddy knew that I was dating Steph, so he said, hey, can you give it Walt and I the weekend, and we'll figure out who wants to go where, then we'll let you guys know, and they allowed us. So I go to Stephanie's house, and I say, hey, babe, like, they took the orders away. I can go to Hawaii or Virginia. And I'm like, I love you. I want to see where this goes. I just, if you want to come, then we can go to Virginia and see where life works out for us.
Well, I actually told you.
Well, let me tell my version. Hold on. But if not.
He gave me the option. He told me he had Hawaii or Virginia. And I had to sit and think.
Y'all getting Stephanie's version, not my version.
So I ended up telling him, well, there's no way I'm going to go to Hawaii. That's just too far for me. And I just can't. So I told him I was willing to go to Virginia. If he could get Virginia, then I would look at going there with him. Well, so he went back to his friend and his friend gladly took Hawaii.
Yeah. He was like, yeah, bro, I'll swap with you. That's awesome. Yeah. Give me Hawaii for Virginia. Sure.
So ultimately I had this choice. Do I stay where I'm comfortable, my hometown area, at home with my family, my best friend. I've got this plan. It's all worked out. Or do I go with this love of my life out of state where I don't know what's going to happen? I don't have a plan for that. I'm just going to be seeing where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And this was really, really hard for me. I can't even tell you guys because I am actually very close to my family. I love my family, but I also knew in my heart, I already said, I really knew I didn't want to stay ultimately in that area.
Mm-hmm.
And I really did love him. And I felt like we had something really good and I wanted to see where it went. So my heart was telling me I needed to go with him. But then piece of me was like, my mind was like, this isn't rational.
And the fear of uncertainty, right?
My mind is thinking, this isn't rational. This isn't the smart decision, right? If you're looking at more certainty, it's not the smart decision. But my heart was telling me it was the right decision. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, I followed my heart and I followed the love. And honestly, I didn't have a plan. My plan ended up being I'm going to take a year off work, gain the residency there, and then transfer to university there, which is ultimately what I did. And it all worked out. And honestly, I have to tell you guys, it was the best decision of my life. And it changed the whole trajectory of my life. And if I hadn't taken that risk and that chance, I wouldn't be here today. We wouldn't be here together today.
Well, you might have always had regrets like, man, that guy, I was really in love with him. I just wonder where that would have been.
And I moved all the way from Connecticut to Virginia, which you guys is it's a 13-hour drive. It's not close, but it also was not too far to where I told myself, you know what, worst case, if it doesn't work out, I drive back home and be with my parents and start over.
And I think that's the big thing is you asked yourself, worst case, like what's the worst case scenario that can happen? We get so paralyzed by the fear, which makes us...
Before you say that, but ultimately, like, what's the odds that I'm going to find the love of my life again? What are the odds that I'm going to meet the right person that's really someone that I connect with the way I connected with Walt? What are the odds of that? I can always find another school. I can get a job. All those things I can do anywhere, really. My parents, I knew were always going to be there. That's something a privilege I had is I knew my parents would be there. They were always going to be there for me. They're not going anywhere. But this person is, and I'm not going to, there's nothing to say I can replace him. You don't get that opportunity very often. And that's the kind of question that I ask myself is like, will I ever get this opportunity again? Well,
and what's the worst that can happen?
Right.
Would you rationalize to yourself what's the worst that can happen? What's the worst that can happen? I moved down to Virginia with Walt. He's a big a-hole. He seemed like a charmer, but really he's full of trauma and he's an a-hole. And I'm hightailing myself back to Connecticut. I wasted 6 months.
And by the way, my parents, I can't say my mom didn't really, I knew she didn't really want me to go, but she didn't really try to stop me either. My dad was not happy. I mean, he was like yelling at me and he was telling me like, you're going to go down there and end up pregnant and crying to come back home. And I mean, he was definitely angry about it. He was like, you're all set, and I know I'm a parent. I know as a parent and looking back, I'm like, oh my God, like if my daughter does that, I'm like, I can totally see where he's coming
at
from.
Monica's age now. Right. So I think there's a perspective we didn't have back then. And here's this Navy guy sweeping, his daughter off of her feet and she's going to go move with him.
Yeah.
And it's not like they didn't like me. They liked me a lot, but they loved their daughter.
I was 19 when I moved with him and with no certainty of what was going to happen. I mean, they met Walt, they knew him, but I mean, he's thinking like, you got the sure thing over here and you're going to go into that total unknown. Don't know what you're doing. You're young. You think you know everything and you don't, like as a parent, I could totally see where he was coming from. But at that time, and it was hard for me because I want to make my parents proud and I want, everybody wants to do that for their parents. So like, that was a super hard decision, but I got to tell you guys follow your heart.
I think that's it is there's so much the fear of uncertainty, but when you ask yourself, what if, and there's some energy behind it, and there's some blessings behind it, and there's a mindset behind it of all the possibilities. And even if you're going to rationalize a piece of it, you say, like, what is the worst that can happen? I talked to a friend of mine recently, and like Steph said, this is my jam. People come to me when they just know they need to get fired up, and they're going to do whatever they ask me about by the time we're done with the conversation. I promise you that's going to happen by the time we're done. But it's really just digging, and it's, she wanted to take a different role. That was a pay cut. That was totally outside of what she had done her whole career. That was outside of what her master's degree was. And go work for somebody playing chess in the long game of where she thought she could end up if she did that, and what she can learn from a skill set perspective to get there. But there was a lot of fear of, what if this is a poor decision? I'm leaving my career, my normal career, to go do this. I'm taking a pay cut. So I just really asked her, what's the worst that can happen? Well, I guess, she's in her early 30s, and she goes, the worst that can happen is I can't pay my mortgage, I lose my house, and I go live with my parents. And I was like, okay. So the worst that can happen is you go live with your parents. Now, what if everything works out the way you want? What could happen? And she rattled off like 15 things, all these beautiful, amazing things, and where her life could be. And, we're projecting 20 years down the road by the time we're done with this conversation. Then the decision to embrace the fear of the unknown became easy, because you realize, like you, what was the worst that can happen? You move back with your parents. I'm a big a-hole. You tried, but you would know your whole life that really wasn't the love of my life. And then you thought, what could happen?
I wouldn't live with regret, thinking
right.
What would have happened if I had?
Because that's where you would have been. But instead, what happened is you thought about the what ifs. There were 30 things that you thought about, maybe 100 because it was me. But y'all like what I did there. But you thought about all the what ifs, and you said, you know what? I'm going to do it scared. I'm going to embrace the fear. I don't really know what's going to happen, but I'm all in. And man, when you can live your life embracing the fear and going all in.
And you guys, I have to say too, we went down there with nothing. I didn't have a car. I didn't even have my own car at that point. Yeah. I had what I could fit in a car with my best friend my best friend did go with me. So that was like one security that I had. But even that, you don't know what's going to happen. But we took what could fit in a car. So I took my clothes and maybe some kitchen items my mom gave me, some bathroom things. And that was it. We had nothing. We rented this apartment together, and my best friend came, and there was a guy she was dating too. So we had roommates. We got an apartment together, and all four of us had nothing when we moved in there.
Just a bunch of young kids trying to make it. And I want to continue on now, and so we're talking about Steph making that huge decision. We talked about where fear comes from, the 4 different types of fear: the fight, the flight, the freeze, and the fawn. We talked about why our body will, through fear, it shuts down certain aspects to get rid of rational thinking. And I want to talk about, so how do you actually break through the fear? How do you just say, you know what? Mel Robbins says this a lot. She goes, count back from 5, because neuroscience has shown you'll make the leap. Right? 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Think about when we're kids. We're like 1, 2, 3, and we jump. Right? We jump because we haven't had negative past experiences. We're not really fearful of the unknown. We don't feel the social pressure and judgment when we're little kids. And we got to get back to that childlike wonder. I was going to
say, we learn a lot from children.
We got to get back to that childlike wonder of the what if. And it's funny because I think about, I not as much anymore the older I get, but I used to love amusement parks. They were my jam, right? And Stephanie, so of course she would go, and she liked amusement parks too. And she liked roller coasters, but I like to sit in the front. So I'll never forget. And it was like every roller coaster we went on, but this particular time just sticks out in my brain. We went on the Intimidator, which you're doing 80 miles an hour by the time you click, 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 click. That's supposed to build the fear. It's supposed to build
like straight up
the intensity. And by the time you get to the bottom of this hill and make the turn, you're doing literally 80 miles an hour. Rolling. People pass out on the ride. Is friggin' hilarious. So we're in line, and we're like 3 people from the front of the line. And she's like, all of a sudden it hits her. She's like, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I could do this. And I said, oh, we just waited in line for like an hour and a half. We fit to do this. We're about to do, I promise you, we're going to go on this ride. And I'm like, you can do it. Come on, you can do it. She's the next people get on. And we're next in the barrier for the line. She's like, oh my God. And you could just physically.
And you guys literally, every roller coaster, I still get scared every time I'm going to get on it.
And you could see this fear in her. Like her palms are sweaty. She's breathing heavy. She's like trying to just do breathing meditation exercises in line. And we get on the ride anyway. She buckles up. Feel it. You could see her heart beating all fast.
I'm really thinking like, I hate you right now. Making me do this.
We clickety clack all the way up to the top.
And my heart's in my stomach.
We get to the top and she starts screaming. We're on the 80 miles an hour, the turn, twisted turns, upside down, all this stuff. We go to get off the ride. And it's, how do you feel when you get off that ride?
Exhilarated.
Right. Proud of yourself, exhilarated, like that was so good. Let's go do it again.
Oh, dang. Like I survived. For when I survived, but
that was fun.
But damn, that was actually pretty awesome.
That was cool. You're exhilarated. You're proud of yourself. Like I did it. I overcame that fear. And that's such a simple example, but really that's how we need to live our life. And I'll give you another example with the ride. So our kids are 2.5 years apart. So when they were little, we went to Busch Gardens one time in Virginia and there was a little ride. It was like a little kite ride or something like that. Well, so my youngest daughter is like 2.5. Maybe they're like 4 and 6.5. I don't know. So for her, the 4-year-old, the little ride's cool. They're about a foot off the ground, 2 feet off the ground. But it was freaking hilarious. This is what living your life, not embracing the fear feels like. So I just told you how Stephanie went on the roller coaster, exhilarated, change, the wind in her hair. She's not sweating no more. She's smiling. Her whole day's changed. So my daughter is on with her little sister, right? My 6-year-old with my 4-year-old. The ride goes around in a circle. It's literally like a foot off the ground. It's so funny. I can still picture this in my head. As they go around, and it's moving so slow, you guys. Even I was like, this is a lame ride right now. As my 6-year-old comes back around, she literally looks at me almost mad and gives me a thumbs down. Like, this ride sucks. And that's what living your life, not embracing the fear, feels like. It freaking sucks, man.
Staying in the comfortable place.
Not even if it's a painful, comfortable place, just a comfortable place. We're not made to be comfortable.
Just staying comfortable.
Think about
embracing fear because you want to be comfortable.
The exhilaration in life comes from conquering your fears, not from staying in your quiet misery and comfortable pain. Mm-hmm. That's not where it comes from. So if you're sitting out there, you get on the damn roller coaster of life. Jump in. We're going to talk about the 4 keys to breaking through the fear here in a second. But, and I think, Steph, I'll let you take the first one, but get on the roller coaster. Stop hesitating. It's time. I don't even say 1, 2, 3. I'm just like,
jump.
Because if I think about it, I might not do it. So I just go. That's my philosophy. And I used to say a cuss word with the F it.
He'll really try to make it to where if he's with us and he sees us like hesitating, he'd be the one that pushes you.
I'm peer pressure for real. I'm not even going to play out. So if you want to hang out, be ready for some peer pressure to do what scares you the most, because I love seeing people's reactions on the other side of the fear. And I love seeing people's lives change on the other side of the fear. Such a beautiful journey.
I just wanted to mention something I saw before we got on here. And this is from Zig Ziglar. He said that fear has 2 meanings. And this is kind of what we were talking about with the what if. It either means you have 2 choices. Forget everything and run, or face everything and rise. And I think that's so powerful, and that is so true. And that's what he's talking about between staying in the comfort, which would be to forget everything and run, because you want to stay comfortable, or face everything and rise.
And don't tell me you don't have 2 choices, because you do. Everything in life is a choice. Now, it doesn't mean the choice is easy. It doesn't mean that the choice doesn't require sacrifice. It doesn't mean that the choice isn't going to create maybe some short-term hardship for you. But we all got the choice whether or not we're going to embrace the fear of the unknown, turn around, face what scares us the most, knock it to the ground, and start looking out the windshield of life. Start riding in the HOV lane while everybody else is stuck in traffic, because you actually have the courage to do it.
I love that you said that, because it really is. Have the courage. It takes courage to do it. And trust me, the result on the other side it's like nothing you could ever experience. I mean,
so if you're sitting here and you're like, all right, guys, all right, I got the belief. I'm going to embrace this fear. I'm going to embrace the uncertainty. I'm going to like relish in the uncertainty. I'm going to like swim in it. This is what I'm talking about. Let's go do it. Now, how am I supposed to do that? And I think, so we're going to go through these 4 keys. First of all, you need to realize why you're so fearful. What's the root cause of your fear? Really dig down. And that's when Stephanie said, this is my jam. That's what I do with people. I ask questions and I dig and I uncover. And typically it's negative past experiences. It's traumas. It's the time when you spoke your truth and somebody didn't believe you. It's the time when a friend hurt your feelings. And now you make an absolute statement. Well, you know what? Every time I open up to somebody, I get my feelings hurt. Well, you know what? Every time I try to do something that's going to change my life, it doesn't work out for me. That's for other people. And that is...
I like the example you talked about with the hurdles.
Oh man, what I say? You guys know how you say something and you like black out while you're talking about it, and later on you think of it. And so, yeah, I talked about this. So let's say you're running track and you're running over these hurdles and you love it. It's so cool. You jump over the hurdles. You feel like you're running through the wind in your hair. You're like, man, this is my jam. And you're running over these hurdles in life, these challenges in life. It's the same metaphor. And you trip and fall. And you look and you see people laughing and you see people holding their mouth. It can be okay. And you see all these things. And then you just stop running. And your perception is that every time you run, you're going to trip and fall. Or your perception is if you trip and fall, people are going to laugh at you. People are going to point at you. People are going to feel sorry for you.
And you just stop running the hurdles.
And then you stop running the hurdles. You stop even trying to challenge yourself in life to where you don't even try anymore. And then you live a life of quiet desperation and regret. And none of us want to do that. This is why Stephanie and I, we get so damn fired up and we get so passionate about this. So figure out what the root cause of the fear is and stop talking in absolute statements. Nothing happens all the time. And I'll give you a funny example. Steph might not think it's funny. So we run late a lot, right? So I caught myself saying, you know what? We're always late. That's not the reality. But because I'm speaking in an absolute statement, guess what I feel like? We're always late. Guess what that does? It just puts me in a state of inner chaos and turmoil. Then I'm snippy with her, and then it caused arguments between the two of us. Then we get in the crazy cycle we talked about instead of the loving cycle. We're not always late. Sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. Sometimes you win in life, sometimes you learn the lesson. Stop talking in absolutes and go after what you really want to do and have the courage to lead from the front, because maybe somebody's waiting on you to have the courage to step into your power and your potential and your purpose, because they need to hear your story so they can do the same. That's real.
Yeah, so he talked about realize why you're fearful. Number 2, visualize your success. And that was where we talked about with the what if, where how you ask yourself that question. When you say, well, what if, I'm going to use this example because this was something we were going to get to, was Walt made a choice to leave corporate America to do this.
Scary.
And we had to, and it's just like the story I just told you guys about when I went to Virginia. I had to ask myself those what if questions. Mm-hmm. And believe me, I was thinking negative and positive. You gotta weigh the pros and cons. You have to do that. But ultimately you have to say, like, but really do the pros outweigh the cons? And that's where that what if, like, you can say what if, and you can say all kinds of negative stuff can happen. Mm-hmm. But there's also, you got to let yourself dream a little, because there's a lot of good things that can happen too. And it really is, whichever attitude you take is what you're going to get. Because if you're just thinking it's going to be negative, it's going to be negative. But if you're willing to let yourself dream a little and think that the good can happen, well, guess what? It probably will. So when he made the choice, you know, and I'll actually let him tell this because it's definitely more personal to him. You know, he had a decision because he was just getting crushed at work in corporate America, and he just wasn't happy doing it, and had been unhappy for quite a while. And he literally had, I don't know what you want to call it. I think it's a panic attack. He calls it a nervous breakdown, but ultimately
not fun.
He thought he was having a heart attack. We took him to the hospital because he thought he was having signs of a heart attack, and it turns out it was more of a panic attack because it was just so much stress and pressure on him for so long. And, you know, we started to talk about whether to, I mean, ultimately I knew in my head he was going to have to leave the job no matter what, whether that was going to another job or doing something else. I didn't know that, but I knew he was going to have to leave that job. But he felt like he'd be letting his team down. That's all he kept bringing up was like, I can't let them down. And he just felt like he was letting everybody down. He'd be letting us down. He'd be his family. He'd be letting the people at work down. And he felt all this pressure. And we had to have a talk because I could just see what it was doing to him. And I didn't like that either. And, you know, so it got to a point where he got kind of snippy with me. It was like one evening after work. And I don't know why. I just knew. I knew by what he said to me that it was out of character for him and that something was off. And so in that moment, instead of reacting and getting like, you know,
defensive.
Yeah, getting defensive back, I just stopped and said, you know, is everything okay? You know, like, it seems like there's something wrong. And he kind of just broke down at that moment because it's like he had been holding all that in. And there's finally an opportunity that he could just say how he really felt. And so he just broke down. He actually kind of was crying. He was just like, no, I'm not okay. I literally feel like a fraction of who I am and like a shell of who I really am. And I've never seen him like that. Like, you have to understand, like, Walt has always been like almost like that pillar of strength. Like, he's the rock. He's the, you know, we depend on him for everything. And to see him break down like that was really kind of shocking to me and kind of like, whoa, and scary to me because I was like, wow, I've never seen him like this. This is not normal. And, you know, with him having that like the whole, we had to take him to the hospital. That was a real wake up call for me too. And so we had to have a real talk. And I said, you know, I just want you to know, like, you don't have to keep doing this. You can walk away from this. Like, we'll find a way. Because at the time, like, I didn't work. I told you I haven't worked for years. So he has been the breadwinner. And so that was a huge decision for us. Like, we do have a supplemental income. It's nothing compared to what he was making.
Yeah. Don't match the executive pay I was getting, that's for sure.
But he does have a Navy retirement. So we had some income from that didn't require him to work. So I told him, like, you know, I feel like we know that could at least cover our main bills, like our mortgage and like things that we have to pay, and we'll figure out a way. But it's almost like he just needed the permission to, like, he needed to know that I wasn't going to be, like, he wasn't letting us down.
I think there's a couple things for me. In episode 9, we talked about vulnerability, and this is where I really started to learn the power and the vulnerability for me personally, to not be Captain Resilient all the time. I think in those moments, I felt like I was letting my team down. I was fearful I was letting my team down. I was fearful I was letting you guys down. I was fearful of, gosh, like, what if I slow down? Like, am I going to be able to pick myself back up? I was fearful of losing the income of corporate America. I was full of resentment, not towards you guys, just full of resentment in general. Like, I'm supposed to be happy, and here I am freaking miserable. I can't even be happy, and I'm making more money than I ever had. We have all the things. This is when I realized things don't bring you happiness. I'm trying to recreate this generational legacy, and I already had. And then it hit me when we talked about it, when you're like, just leave, write your book. Like, you wanted to be a professional speaker. You've been speaking professionally for 25 years, but you wanted to be a let's just go for it. Like, if not now, when? And I really had to overcome the fear of being the breadwinner for my family. The pressures that everybody does, but men, that providing and protecting pressure you put on yourself that keeps you not showing up as a man that you're supposed to be, which will allow you to provide and protect for your family.
Well, and I want to say this was a really deep rooted fear for you, I think, because growing up the way you did, I think there's always like, he had this insatiable drive and ambition like you've never seen because of what he came from. It's like he was running from he just wanted to get so far away from ever living like he did growing up, that he, and that's his thing, was like, he took a lot of pride in that he could provide in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So this was like a huge, like, just, I would say probably one of his biggest fears to ever face was like, I just don't know how I could really walk away from making that money. Like,
well, it was like, okay, if I walk away from that and I try to be a professional speaker and we do the things that we're asking the what if questions and getting excited about the potential. But this is why it's so important. Where your mind goes, your energy flows, you guys. But it was so easy to say, what if it doesn't work and we end up broke, and we worked our tails off to get to this point, made good decisions when other people weren't really focused on like elevating where we're headed in life. And it all turns out for nothing. That's really what I thought to myself. If you want to be real, what if I go broke after all these years of working my freaking tail off? What if I go broke? And I really had to think to myself, because human nature takes you down that path. I really had to think to myself, but what if my story does help change people's lives? What if I get to go out and be a professional speaker? What if I get to live my purpose and my dream that I've had since we met, that I had since I was a teenager and started dreaming and thriving instead of just surviving? So if you're out there, start asking yourself the what if and let your mind go there. When your mind goes to the what if and the possibilities, your energy moves in that direction, you will attract things into your space. Opportunities you didn't even know that you were going to get, because your momentum is headed there. And that takes us into the next piece. And that's, you got to take action. Look, I've taken so much messy action since I still don't know what the hell I'm doing half the time. I just keep taking action. Action creates results, which creates belief. And when you can get in the action, results, belief, rinse and repeat cycle, you can live a joyous, happy, fulfilled life. When you don't take action, you don't get results. And when you don't get results, you don't create the belief that you can move down the path that you really want to in your life. And it creates quiet desperation, and it creates regret. You are at a fork in the road right now in your life. I know you are, if you're listening to this, with some decision. Take the road of action, results, and belief, and stop being scared of what you think might happen, because you actually really don't know. The only controllable in this situation is the action and the step you're going to take. And what I found on this journey, this is the fourth key, is truly celebrating this journey and the success along the way. I started getting some yearly, the Facebook will be like, last year, 1 year ago today, the reminder or the memories. And there's stuff that came up that I did a year ago that feels like 5 years ago sometimes, that came up a year ago that I thought, damn, that was only a year ago. All these little steps I'm taking every single day, all these little things, this action I'm taking every single day have created results, which just empower me on a whole nother level. Like, that's what's waiting for you if you're listening to this podcast around the action. And then it's sustained, consistent action over time that brings the success. You can't be like, okay, I'm going to take action. Oh, I'm going to be a professional speaker. I'm going to call somebody and see if I can do it. And then you make one phone call and they get told no. And then you're like, see, I knew it wouldn't work. That's not action. That's barely an attempt. Action requires consistency.
I have to say that's something that I learned by watching Walt was I watched him always just take action. Even when he started this process, like he just jumped in and started doing it. He didn't even know what he was doing. He just did it. He just started doing something. If you just start by just doing something towards it, it will like everything else will follow. It's just a matter of the hardest part is getting started and just taking the uncomfortable action and just going for it. That's the hardest part. After that, it's like, well, I'm in it now. I'm going to figure it out.
You remember when we bought the green screen to put behind us and all that stuff? And the green screen,
thing.
like my shoulders were cut off and I'm like trying to move my hands and they keep disappearing.
Yeah, the first videos that Walt did, it was like, oh my gosh, you look back now and it's like,
I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I just tried. Just recently, Steph and I started putting out Legacy Warrior reels and clips of the shows. Meanwhile, and by the way, if you're married, like y'all need to like do this together, but be careful because we're like arguing because we're both frustrated because neither of us know how the hell did you like transfer into the iMovie and do all these things that we need to do. But we knew if we took action, we're going to end up getting the results.
Well, it's like the first podcast I did. I didn't know what I was doing. I just got on, just went with it because he's like, well, I'm here. Like, if you're struggling, I'll help you. But the first question they asked me was like, tell me about yourself. And I literally was like telling them my whole life story and like how I'm from Philly and my whole family. And I mean,
I got 3 brothers.
I got off there like, oh my God, I just totally bombed that. But whatever.
But you really didn't, right? You really didn't bomb it. It was still really good. But did you tighten it up and are you getting better results now because of the messy action you took initially?
Yeah. Well, even on that episode, the couple that interviewed us, because that was actually when we were on and they were interviewing us. And that was my very first one. And at the end of the podcast, I mean, they were just into it, like listening to us, like leaning in and, you know, and I was like, wow, you could tell they really got something out of that podcast themselves. So to me, that was a win. I didn't, and you know what? At the end, I could have really beat myself up. I did a little bit, but honestly, I was really proud of myself that I just did it, that I went for it scared and I did it. And I was just proud of myself for that.
Well, and I think that you just said something really important that people need to understand. We all have a tendency to nitpick ourselves the worst. Typically people are their own worst critics. So when you do something scared, and this is why celebrating the journey and all the little success along the way is so vital. You got to be really intentional about not beating yourself up. It'd have been, now that didn't mean you didn't listen to it. And that didn't mean we didn't talk about how we can improve. And I say like all the freaking time on here. Now you guys are going to listen to it every time. We listen to these podcasts again because we want to keep getting better with how we articulate our message. But at the end of the day, we're just going to be who we are and you're going to like it or you're not. But are we going to get better over time? Has Stephanie like literally leaps and bounds from her first podcast to now? Yes. Have I from my first podcast? But look, you can't win the Super Bowl if you ain't willing to practice in the preseason. You got to practice in the preseason. You got to take the messy action. You're going to get better. You're going to get more solidified in what you're doing. You're going to move into the regular season.
I'm going to tell you guys, nobody is good at on the first try. Nobody is. We all have to start somewhere.
Just suck and get it over with. It's okay.
Like we were talking about Joe Rogan. We saw his first podcast and he's literally in someone's living room and I don't even know what he was using.
He looked like he had an old beat up green couch. Like he had a handheld mic that they had it back and forth between him and his homie. And it looked like all of his friends must have slept on the couch at one point or another. I mean, it was rough. But
and now look at him. Yeah. He has the #1 podcast.
$100 million contract, #1 podcast, impacting people all over the world.
But guess what? When he started, he was not there.
and guess what he didn't know? He didn't know what was going to happen. He just knew he had a hope, a dream, a purpose, and he just went for it, took the messy action, embraced the fear, went for it anyway, didn't worry about the judgment from other people, didn't worry about anything that wasn't in his control, and he just did it, and he was consistent over time. He made adjustments along the way. He improved along the way. His studio's bomb now. And look
now
at
he's got a whole team of people helping him.
But you don't go from 0 to 100 in one jump. Stop trying to act like you don't need to do the work.
Everything's a process and a journey.
Do the work. But first, embrace the fear. Stop being paralyzed. Stop freezing. Stop fawning. Start fighting. And start stepping into your power.
It's never going to be perfect. If you wait for the perfect time to have everything perfectly lined up, you're never going to get started. You're never going to do it because nothing's perfect. It's never going to be. And you're not going to get anywhere near perfect without doing it a bunch of times. That's the reality.
You know what? On that note, we could just continue on for 2 hours, y'all. But look, we're going to wrap this episode up. So if this episode resonated with you, share it with somebody. Shoot them a text. Somebody you know that can benefit from this conversation that is on the precipice of seriously fulfilling their life's purpose, fulfilling their potential, and stepping into their power in a different way. Send it to them because you might be the reason that they change their life today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Legacy Warrior podcast on any platform. We're on literally every single one. You can check out the video on YouTube or join us on our Instagram page at Legacy Warrior Podcast. We love your feedback. We love your thoughts. We just had somebody reach out to us today about doing an episode. So that is going on our tracker of episodes that we're going to do. And that's Comparison Being the Thief of Joy. That won't be next week, but that one's going to be coming up. And so we love your feedback. We're here to serve you. We're here to help you accelerate your life. And, we can't wait to continue to just live this vision and purpose that we have and keep embracing the fear on our own. And so until the next time, stay in the arena of life, keep fighting, taking steps forward, and
leave this world a little bit better than you found it.
Boom. See you next Tuesday.